Let's talk about this situation, because we seem to have exactly, nothing else to speak about, Holly, at the moment. Rishi Sunak had his Downing Street speech sort of defenestrated over the course of the weekend. We've had our own investigation. Tell us a bit about that, first of all, and why the Charities Commission is now involved.
OK, so back in November, TalkTV found content sermons from a number of figures at mosques across the country, containing to preach what appeared to be very alarming anti-Semitic rhetoric. For example, calls to destroy Israelis and to come and kill the Jews. We put that content to the relevant police forces. As it stands, we know that at least 2 West Yorkshire and the Met are still investigating whether any offences, any hate crimes have been committed. One case has been referred to the CPS from Northamptonshire Police, and we've actually heard from West Midlands Police today, who have confirmed that they've reviewed the footage and said no offences have been committed. So a number of groups, angry, of course, at these videos, at this content, at these sermons that are being preached, have written to the Charities Commission urging them to launch an urgent investigation. The campaign against anti-Semitism being one of them. The Charities Commission has been looking into these sermons and now say that they are investigating. They've confirmed they're assessing the talks for any potential regulatory action and said in a statement the Commission acknowledges the concerns that have been raised again about the charities and confirmed they're currently assessing all the information available, and if they find there has been any wrongdoing, they'll take action to address this. Now, just to explain, the Charities Commission will be investigating because these mosques are part of registered charities, so they could be stripped of their charitable status.
Right, because presumably charitable status means there are certain things you can and cannot do. But I'm interested in what you said about, obviously one case is being investigated by the police. They may be bringing charges, but others are not. I don't know if we've got any of those original videos, but I remember watching them at the time and thinking to myself, well, all of these surely are in breach of some kind of hate law. But some of the police officers of the police obviously don't agree.
Yes, that's correct. As I said, so there's 2 that are still under investigation, as we know, the West Yorkshire and the Met. One force has sent their files to the CPS for a charging decision which hasn't yet been made. And we have heard, after asking for an update today from West Midlands Police, after putting 2 of the videos we found to them from Birmingham mosques, they say they've reviewed the footage and no offences have been committed. So as far as they're concerned, there have been no hate crimes.
Yes. Interesting, isn't it? Let me bring Annabelle and Madeline in. Annabelle, this sounds very similar to what happens at the weekend, doesn't it, in London, where you see certain banners being held up and certain things being projected onto Parliament and certain chants being made, and the police at the end of it all saying, well, it's not really a hate crime, it's sort of OK because it's a public protest. I wonder if they're taking the same view of some of this material.
I think that you're right in your suspicions. You have to wonder first how the Jewish community must feel about this discussion there about the groups which have spoken out in response to the investigation, and how frightened Jewish people up and down Britain must now feel today, because what they do is they look at the police response and they feel as though the threat to them, to their safety, is not being taken seriously. And who can blame them? There seem to be rampant double standards now between the way in which certain protests are being policed. It is not enough for the police just to be present. They also need to be policing at the same time. And there's been a real lack of that, despite the fact that to most people's minds, there has been some action, albeit from a small minority, that warrants a more robust response. Now, when it comes to Rishi's speech last week, my concern is that the rhetoric was right, but is he going to follow it up with robust action? And how will he follow it up with robust action, which doesn't infringe on the civil liberties of the law-abiding majority? What I don't want to see is just more laws being brought in when there are many laws which the police already are not enforcing, laws that will restrict our freedoms.
Absolutely right. And Madeline, I think Annabelle's correct in that, isn't she? Because the first thing I thought of when I started reading the analysis of what Rishi Sunak had said was, well, who's going to call somebody an extremist, and what is an extremist, and where does extremism start and where does it end? Because, by the sounds of what he was saying, as long as he says you're an extremist, you must be one.
Yeah, you have to be, as is so often the case, the government, I think, sometimes wants to look busy and show that it's achieved something concrete. So its way of doing this is to add new legal obligations, to expand the remit of what the police are supposedly trying to do. What would actually solve the problem is if the police simply followed the rules as they currently stand and applied proper policing. There's even talk today of, expanding the definition of extremist to be anyone who undermines, quote, British values. Well, that's also a problem, because, I mean, that can mean all sorts of different things, I think, but perhaps we should stick to what has usually been the definition, which is things like incitement to violence.
Yes.
And of course, the spectre of two-tier policing is also a real problem, because, as Annabelle was saying, you know, people can see that some protests are not being policed anywhere near as thoroughly as other forms of protest. And I'm thinking particularly of a case very recently where a chap who had been making like racist stickers that he'd been selling, he got 2 years in prison for that. I mean, I think what he did was awful too, but the fact is it's very obvious that, you know, that the anti-Semitism on display at these marches is so prevalent and almost so numerous that they don't really.
Well, the police's excuse for most of it seems to be, well, there's more of them than there are of us, so we better not do anything because it might cause a public order offence. And it's like, well, you're the police. You're supposed to control public order. You don't control it by allowing people to be law-breaking and then just do nothing about it. And the only thing we've seen so far as I can tell, is the guy who was arrested or led away because he was holding up an anti-Hamas sign, and they said they were doing it for his own safety because he kept getting attacked. And then this weekend there was a Jewish preacher in Hyde Park Corner who was similarly being attacked, and so the police sort of took him out of the way so that he couldn't be hurt. So everything's gone sort of in the wrong direction here.
No, that's right. I think often it is those who are abiding by the law, those who want to protest peacefully, who are going to suffer in all of this. They're going to suffer from the police not doing their jobs properly. But I think a big problem with Rishi's speech last week was how he brought in the far right and tried to equate the level of threat presented by the far right with that presented by Islamists. And that's been a long-standing problem in Britain today. That's not to downplay the fact that there is a threat from the far right. There absolutely is potentially a terrorist threat from them at some point. We certainly hope not. But the scale of the threat from Islamists in Britain today far outweighs that. And I felt as though the Prime Minister was unwilling to confront that. And if he won't confront it as our Prime Minister leading the state, then how can we expect the
Well, this is the problem.